As ever in midwinter, the weather throws everything at us. This January we've had massive floods, storms, very hard frosts down even in Dorset down to -8 and -9, freezing fog, cold winds. And what that's meant is the Dorset Stour has been up and over the fields, very coloured. And then after that, it finally settled down and we started to get a dropping river, but very cold weather. So what happened was the colour has dropped out of the river, and this is because at normal temperatures, calcium salts, which is the dissolved chalk if you like, are dissolved in the water, but as the temperature drops they basically crystallize out and they coat tiny particles of silt, which is what gives the river that colour that we all like as anglers, to have some colour, not turbid, not like milky coffee, but just a bit of a tinge, and that colour drops right out. So the silt particles become heavier and they drop to the bottom out of suspension, and we end up with a gin clear river. After over a week of very cold weather, it finally got a little bit milder, but still frost at night, and where water had gone over the fields and collected into big puddles, there was still ice on those puddles, not particularly thick, maybe a third of an inch. And even where the grass had gone over, and that had frozen as well, so like a skin on it. And then each day the frost would go off about 11 o'clock, so I decided on a fairly late start, getting ready to fish by about 12 o'clock. And on the Upper Stour there's an awful lot of fish up there. There's lots of chub, plenty of roach, quite a few dace, a few gudgeon, pike, perch. On other stretches there are bream and rudd and stuff, but basically it's chub and roach and dace where I like to fish. I decided to have a bit of a different approach this time and take a tip rod. Believe it or not, I haven't ledgered at all this season, which is quite extraordinary. Usually at some point I get round to doing some ledgering, but this time I just haven't. I've just float fished or pole fished. So I took my old Normark quiver number 2, which has got a carbon tip. I've also got the number 1 tip for it, which is the soft fiberglass tip, and I thought the carbon tip would be best with a good strong current, a good flow, good winter flow on the Stour, that clear water. And I tackled up very simple rig with a little mesh feeder, taking with 1/2 ounce of loading and an extra bit of lead strip. Don't want it bouncing on the bottom when it on the Stour. There's a lot of snags on the bottom. On the Thames, where you get a very clean riverbed, you can bounce it around and that's good. On the Stour, if you do that, it will just go into snags. So you want to cast it in and you want it to hold. It would be nice if it would move, but like I say, it snags up too much. Got 6-pound main line, some trilene. I want fairly, if I do get snagged, I want the hook link to go. 4-pound hook link with a size 10 Camasan B611, which is a nice big hook, and I'm going to put pinches of flake on there. I wasn't sure, I thought it would fish well, but it was obvious that the water was really cold, and that's a bad sign. Chub will feed in the cold, but I tried float fishing in I think 3 or 4 swims with bread punch over some liquidized bread, and I also tried maggots on a 20 single and double in runs that are normally really prolific with fish. Not a sign of a fish, well, apart from one tiny little rise right next to the float. Some little roach or dace or something hopped out right next to the float. So it was down to fishing the feeder. In one swim I got a couple of fast taps and in consecutive casts, but didn't connect with anything. And there was another swim that was quite fast, and that's where I settled down to fish. And it was a question, I just keep exploring the swim, dropping it around, dropping the feeder around and waiting for a bite, and eventually got a very subtle, gentle tap, and then the rod started to pull round. And as I was concentrating pretty hard, I hit it, as you can see here. There's a good scrap. These old Normark rods were beautifully designed, very good quality carbon, and they will take on a good bend, but there's enough backbone to them to play a good chub, as well as being a brilliant bream rod. Caught lots of good roach and bream on this rod over the years, a few tench, but it's a nice rod for fishing for chub on this sort of gear, fairly light gear. It's not the sort of rod I would use in the summer with 8-pound line, but with sort of 4, 5, 6-pound line it's fine. I think it shows on days like this, and that was my only fish, that you have to give it a go. Try ledgering in the spots that look likely. Creep in quietly, don't stomp around or bang anything. I just sat on an unhooking mat on the bank, and I could get set up nicely there with the feeding the liquidized bread through the feeder. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm looking forward to some better float fishing soon if the weather gets milder, and maybe the colour will return into the river, and the roach and the dace will start feeding as the temperature rises. But that's a tale for another day soon. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.